I want to thank you all for joining us to celebrate John's life. I'm not going to tell you all the stories about John because we don't have enough time. But I want to tell you a few just so you can get the flavor of John's. Maybe give you a small taste of our life together. We were high school sweethearts. One of our early adventures was the time John picked me up on his Honda 350. We were headed out to meet friends. As we were headed there, we went around this big curve where my parents live, and the bike fell over. Surprise! We skid across the street. As soon as the motion stopped, John jumped off the bike and yelled at me, "Jump in the bushes!" as he grabbed the bike and jumped in the bushes too. So he wanted to make sure that the police did not find us. So as we were laying in there, I was thinking, wow, this guy is crazy, but a lot of fun. Later that summer, he was having trouble with his motorcycle helmet. It kept sliding on his face. He pulled into a gas station to get some gas, and the attendant said, "What's the matter with you?" And John said, "Nothing. Why?" And he said, "You're wearing your helmet backwards." The cool kind of melted from his face. When it was time for college, John went to Hartford and I went to Washington, D.C. He used to hitchhike to see me, 7 hours. Sometimes it would take him 10 to 12 hours to get there on a Friday, and he'd turn around on a Sunday and hitchhike back. We went to Woodstock together. John was one of the few people who went to Woodstock that bought the tickets. And of course, it ended up tickets were not needed, and to our amazement, everybody was either inhaling, snorting, smoking, or shooting up. John and I enjoyed his beer and my Matus.
What's a Matus?
Wine. We married after I finished junior college and John was entering his junior year in college. It wasn't long before our first child, Michael, was ready to enter our world. I was 3 weeks late. John had a night class that he had missed a couple of weeks earlier and told the teacher that his baby had been born. So that's why he wasn't there. So he had the class again and knew he couldn't miss it. So he called 3 of his frat brothers to come over, 2 to babysit for me and one to pick up him at class. And he said, "If she goes into labor, you get here fast as you can and tell me, and you 2 get her to the hospital." So of course, I go into labor and the 2 take me to the hospital and one goes to the classroom to get John, and he is so full of adrenaline. He starts jumping up and down and got John's attention. John stood up, ran out and said, "The baby's sick." A short time later, it was time for our second child, Keith, to be born. Again, I was late and we were watching Kojak on TV. We did not have insurance for the second time. So, John thought the show was too good at this point as I start labor and said, "We cannot go because Kojak might die in this episode." He had to finish the show, which was at 10:15 was when I told him I was in labor. He had to finish the show, and as the labor progressed, I asked John if we could get going. He said, "We can't afford to go to the hospital before midnight."
Why?
Because we'd be charged for a full day.
Why?
By the time he pulled up to the hospital, I couldn't even walk. They ran out with a wheelchair. It was 12 o'clock, and 17 minutes later, Keith was born. Then, 6 years later, we were waiting for our third, Ashley. Natural childbirth was the way to go, so we decided to give it a try. Finishing the childbirth classes, and this being our third child, we were ready, so ready. She came fast and furious. As John was putting on his robe and hat, They were yelling, "She needs to go straight to the delivery room." John started looking at the clock and panting and breathing like I was supposed to do. He goes down on one knee and said, "I need to leave for a minute." I said, of course I yelled, "You are not leaving me now." And as soon as I said that, Ashley's head popped out and he felt better. Those stories were in the beginning years of our lives. What a ride we had together.
Can I say something?
How many wives can say they've been dumped off a motorcycle, flipped off a golf cart, and thrown out of a boat? Not many of you. He left us way too young, but with his big personality, he left all of us with great memories. I was so lucky to be the other half of John and Linda for 50 of his 67 years. He made my life exciting, fun, happy, beautiful, charmed, sometimes frightening, but always complete. I want to invite any of you to share your memories about John. He obviously touched many people here because you are all here to celebrate his life. I think when I woke up and saw the snow coming down today, I knew for sure that John had sent that snow for his 5 grandchildren because they all live in a warm climate. And it's always exciting to see the first snow. Please, anybody who would like to come up, first my son Keith will be talking, and I don't know where we go from there. I know my sister-in-law is going to say something.
Make me laugh. Thanks for everyone coming, family and friends that have come all over the place to celebrate Dad's life. I also want to thank Bruce and his crew for helping put together a great party in Dad's honor. Bruce has been a great friend to Dad and feeding them for many years, including a lot of you here who have come to the Flanigan Christmas parties back in the day. Today is definitely how Dad would want it, a party rather than a wake and funeral. He was much better at laughing and smiling than he was crying. So I can see a few less tears and a lot more laughs and smiles. I'd appreciate that. We are going to keep some aspects of the church going today. You'll see baskets going around the room. Feel free to donate. We'll make sure 100% of the proceeds go to the charity we picked, the Ashley Olsen Family Charlotte Private School Foundation. It's a new foundation, so you may not have heard of it. The Olsens thank you in advance. Today I was going to talk to you all the times my dad has hugged me and told me he loved me, but that would be a pretty short story. Dad was not big on hugs or the words "I love you." Dad was much better at actually showing us how much he loved us, and he was always our biggest supporter. I remember at a young age, Dad was coaching me in midget football. I just crushed a running back coming up the middle. After the play, I had a stinging sensation up my right arm and couldn't feel my toes. As the paramedics checked me out on the sideline, Dad came over to tell me to get back in the game. The paramedics looked at him in disgust and said, "Who are you?" He emphatically said, "I'm his dad." I was in the next play. This is the kind of love and support that lasted through my entire athletic career. Dad never missed a game, and in high school, he rarely ever missed a football practice at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. My teammates were always wondering, what kind of job did that guy have that he could do that? As successful as Dad was in business, family and sports always took priority. Dad loved his lacrosse, becoming close buddies with all my teammates over the years. Many tournaments all over the place. Mom and Dad would host our teams at the Glastonbury tournament for numerous years. Dad was always our general manager wherever we played, making sure we had plenty of water, grilling food for us, and more importantly, plenty of cold beer. In the past couple weeks, I've received dozens of messages from my teammates who have met Dad over the years. I wanted to share one message I received that sums it up pretty well. "Flanny, sorry to hear about your dad. Seeing you aim at Glastonbury, pumpkin patch tournament, and placid tournaments, you could always see what a great relationship you all had and how much you meant to him. Pretty special. Not all have that. Best to your mom at this time and the rest of your family. Take care. There are many great memories with Dad. Watching his flag football games when I was little, ski trips to Vermont and Colorado, boat races, Whaler games, Patriots and Yukon football games, including 2 Patriots Super Bowls together, a World Series game at Fenway, many concerts together, and many years heading to Laconia, New Hampshire for Bike Week. It wasn't just the lax guys that I appreciated. I want to thank all my friends that have made memories with my dad. He always appreciated that, and he'll never forget it. My friends from home growing up, many of you are here. My college friends, my Australian friends, Boston friends, Newport friends, and the motorcycle gang. It's pretty special when a majority of your friends have a close relationship with your parents. And that's how it's always been with Mom and Dad. Dad wasn't always easy on me, and I probably wasn't the most well-behaved kid growing up. Dad gave me a lot of well-deserved beatings. That would definitely be illegal these days. Which I often reminded him as an adult. But later on in life, there was no more fighting unless it was Dad and I fighting someone else. The guy in Glastonbury tailgating us too close, the mobster boat racer in New Hampshire, or the rowdy Eagles fan at the Super Bowl. Dad seemed to have a little more swagger in his step when I was around. And we always had each other's back. As many of you know, Dad was not an easy patient. He can be a bit stubborn. We tried to get him the best care possible, but he wanted to do it his way. I was able to talk to him getting a second opinion at Dana-Farber when this all started. Dana-Farber had great doctors and was gorgeous inside with a huge grand piano playing in the main lobby. Although I think Dad was a bit turned off by the music selection while we were there, as they played Stairway to Heaven and Only the Good Die Young. That didn't help with his choice. Dad ended up staying local. He wanted to be close to home and with friends. He certainly did it his way. Thank you to both sides of the family for always loving my dad and bringing great joy to his life. We go on for days with stories of family gatherings. Thank you to all my dad's friends, both old and new. Dad had many great friendships from all aspects of his life. I have many great memories with you all. Most of all, I want to thank Mom for always being by Dad's side. Through all the good times and bad times, and especially these last 2 years, it was very hard on both of them. I want to toast to my dad. Thought this was fitting for his love of boats. There are good ships, there are wood ships, the ships that sail by the sea, but the best ships are friendships. May they always be. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ashley, John's daughter, Lil Fun. Most of you know this, but my dad has specialty plates on his Suburban that read Big Fun. And the very first Christmas after I got my driver's license, my parents gave me Lil Fun. That pretty much summed up what was important to my dad and my mom. It was always about having fun. I've spent the last 39 years feeling so loved, supported, so proud to have a cool, fun dad who cheered me on from the sidelines and was hands down my biggest fan. My dad wasn't the most affectionate guy, joked he was too macho for that, but none of us ever questioned how much he loved us. My dad's actions spoke so much louder than any hug. I could go on with stories and personal moments and memories my dad had and showed how much he cared, and I have one that pretty much sums up his dedication to me. My dad had 9 lives: motorcycle accident, boating accident, heart attacks, you name it. He gets knocked down and he got right back up. It was my sophomore, junior year in college, and my father had just had his second heart attack. His doctor's orders were that he could not travel far and put any more added strain on himself. My dad rarely missed a game of mine, and he was disappointed in his doctor's orders and told me he would miss my first month of my lacrosse season at American. At William and Mary, in a huddle with the coaches, and as we break out to take the field, I see my dad on the sidelines. I ran to him, hugged him, and asked, "What the hell are you doing here, Dad?" He said, "No doctor is going to tell me I can't see you play." And that is exactly the way my dad lived. He was always there for us, and he did it his way. I know my dad was proud of me and my brothers, and I was proud to be my dad's daughter. I loved being my dad's daughter. I'm going to miss him so much, every day. The day I left for college, he called me every other day, if not every day. And the reason why most of you guys couldn't leave voicemails is because I've been saving my dad's voicemails since the day he was diagnosed with lung cancer. Because I'm afraid not hearing his voice is going to be hard on me. Selfishly, like many of you, I mourn the loss of one more phone call and hearing his big, enthusiastic voice, "Hey, yo, Ash." Having him share one more story and one more good laugh, or see him light up when he sees our children. But I can't help but look around the room and feel so much happiness for him, and his amazing time with all of us proved he lived life to the fullest, full of friends, full of family, and full of big fun. Thank you.
Hi, I'm John's older sister, Noni. I'm 5 years older than him. I was a wonderful role model for him when he was a teenager.
How old are you?
I'm 72. He would ask me, obviously he was underage, to buy him beer, which I dutifully did as the older sister. And I would hide it in the backyard, and he and his buddies would collect it and have a lot of fun. I probably shouldn't have done that, but I couldn't help it. Anything he asked me to do, I would have done. I also remember 40 years ago when my father died, John gave the eulogy, and it was beautiful. But at the end he said, "I ask all of you to come back to our house and tell Jack Flanigan jokes and stories." And I ask all of you to do that today. John was a great joke teller, and unfortunately I'm not a good joke rememberer, but he was a great joke teller. So I hope some of you can remember his jokes.
I don't even know what.
I wrote a little poem here. I'm going to try to get through it. Families Are Forever is a poem I wrote for Christmas in 1992. Sadly, now in December of 2017, this is no longer true. The Flanagans used to be a raucous family of 6, but now there are 2 gone from our mix. I pray that we remaining 4 will be strong for each other, though we'll always mourn the loss of our sister and brother. As a husband, father, and businessman, John's virtues truly shone. What I'll miss most are his phone calls that always started with, "Hey, Noan." We had many deep talks over the past 1.5 years. It was not easy to hear my macho brother dissolve into tears. I wish there had been more I could say or do. I'm happy those calls always ended with us saying, "I love you." So I urge all of you to cherish parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, sisters, and brothers. They knew you first and will love you like no others. I feel John's presence very strongly in all of you today. And I know he's in some heavenly karaoke bar singing "I Did It My Way." Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. I'm David Olson. I know many of you have met, some of you have not. I'm husband of Ashley, son-in-law of John and Linda. We all know that John did not lightly and freely bestow compliments on just anyone. when he did give you a compliment, it had a lot of meaning and it resonated. And that's why I place such high value on being called John's favorite son-in-law. I'm also his only son-in-law. John often referred to me as his favorite son-in-law, and I'll certainly miss John's great sense of humor. You know, one of the things that I admired most about and getting to know John was how many true friendships he created. In the last week or so, 2 weeks, a lot of that has come to the forefront. And I realized that John had this unbelievable gift of being able to be a true best friend to so many of you. Sometimes John would bump into strangers, perhaps even a celebrity, and he swore that they must be friends. They must know John. One of my favorite stories that John shared with me was when he ran into this tall, distinguished-looking, gray-haired gentleman at a waterfront bar. Shocker, waterfront bar. John knew he recognized this man. He started throwing out business references of DocuSource. No, maybe it was Abacus where we knew each other. We must have worked together somewhere. Maybe we rode Harleys together, he said. No, maybe it was boating. Lots of references. John swore this guy must have known John. Well, it was about an hour or so after leaving the bar that John realized he was talking to Bill Raftery, the famous basketball TV commentator. Bill had no clue who John was. He probably left with a great impression of John and would have loved being John's friend as well. You know, John was much more than a father-in-law to me. I've known him for 12 years now. He became a genuine friend, one of my best friends. John always took interest in what I was doing. I think he did that with a lot of us, and that's why his friendships were so meaningful. He wanted to know where I was traveling, who I was meeting with. He remembered people's names. He asked me about it. He followed up. John shared in my interests and made my interest his interest. I'm going to miss those regular conversations with John about our teams, UConn, the Pats, Louisville, and the Bears. I'm going to miss drinking Bud Lights with John. I'm especially going to miss seeing the way John's face lit up every time he saw his grandchildren. As John's affectionately bestowed favorite son-in-law, it is an honor, a blessing, and a privilege to have called John Flanigan my father-in-law. The world does not know a better way.
All right, Pat Dwyer's coming up. Yay!
Hold off.
Oh, all right, Pat, how about your...
Relax, I'm good. I just have a quick story. He was a great friend, as you all know. I just want to tell you about the first time I met him. And it's an example of how much he loved Linda. It was a Monday night football game, the middle of winter, snow on the ground, freezing outside, and I'm in his house on, was it Stanley? I'm in his house on Stanley Drive, and having a few beers, having a great time, a lot of laughs, all that stuff, and it came time for me to eliminate my beers. So remember how much he loved Linda. So I said, John, where's the bathroom? He said, outside. I said, what? He said, outside. I said, why? He said, Linda just cleaned the bathroom today. And if there's one spot on the floor, I'm a dead man. So go outside.
Now that is a typical Joe Cooper statement. 40 years ago, John and I coached midget football together. And that's where I met John. Absolutely no question. He and Linda loved each other. They were neighbors of ours for many, many years. I saw John Flanigan cry twice. And both involved Simsbury High School. It was a good cry. We were playing Simsbury My son Danny was the quarterback at Glastonbury, and Michael was a small but extremely talented and big-hearted halfback for Glastonbury High School. Simsbury was ahead. There was only a few minutes left in the game. We were playing over there. It was their homecoming. I was an assistant coach at Glastonbury High School at the time, and I was up in the booth, supposedly to tell the head coach, Joe Rosano, what was going on. John was with me in the booth. 4th down, 20 yards to go. We don't have any timeouts left. Danny throws a pass down the right sideline. Michael makes one hell of a catch. 40 yards, we score. We beat Simsbury. I look at John, he's crying like a baby. Later that year, my son Danny is wrestling at 171. Keith was a little bit lighter than he appeared to be today. But a tough kid. And Danny used to wrestle with Keith. We were the only two guys of similar weight at that particular time. But Keith was maybe a sophomore at that time.
Freshman when Danny was a senior.
We go over to Simsbury, and they're number 1, and we're number 2. We're down double digits going into the last 4 matches. Every match has to be won by a pin for us to win and win the championship. Keith pins, Danny pins, Mike Litke pins, Denny Moran pins, and we win. I look at John, he's crying like a baby. Nobody ever loved his family more than John Flanagan.
Pat, you're supposed to use the microphone.
Steve, I don't always win my cases, but the judges say, thank God I can hear them.
I tell you, I'm sure that's part of how you win them. I don't know how many people have heard this. Oh yeah!
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Taking a shower this morning, that's all I could hear was, oh yeah! Patriots score? Oh yeah! Ashley scores? Oh yeah! Michael scores a touchdown. Oh yeah! How many times did I ski down the slope?
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah! You got it. Oh yeah!
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm Steve Rabala, and I've known, been lucky to know John and Linda for 40 years, close to 40 years.
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of surreal to be at a party for John with him not being here. My wife considers John a friend, I consider John a friend, and my family considers John a friend. In my family, cool meant John Flanigan. You don't know how many times they said, why can't you be like Mr. Flanigan?
Daddy.
Those that know me know I can't. But I tried. I've actually been out to dinner with John and Linda more than any other couple in the world. And I don't think I've ever had a chance to pick a restaurant. I became a pretty good skier because of John, trying to keep up with John, followed by my wife. Then Linda and I would be trailing. But because of him, I became a good skier. My family became great skiers. Because John shared everything. His ski house, all his toys, they all got to play with him. John had an amazing ability to make everything seem easy. He could run a business, run a family, party, even detail my car, and have enough time for everything. So I was trying to think of what theme went through John's entire life, and I think Linda alluded to the fact that John was fast. He got married fast, had a family fast, started a business fast, bought a house in Florida fast, sold the condo, bought another one fast, owned fast cars, skied fast. I never saw anybody eat faster. And if you think he ate fast, he could drink 2 gin and tonics before he got one, followed by a few Bud Lights. He drove boats fast. He had snowmobiles. He had ski-doos.
What is that?
Jet skis.
You don't know what a skidoo is? Maybe they're jet skis, I guess. But the one thing that he did fast that I wish he didn't was play golf. I don't know if anybody's had the experience of playing golf. At the end of 3 holes, he was done. Where's the bar? And unfortunately, he died fast. So, I'm going to miss him a lot. My family's going to miss him a lot. Oh yeah!
Jeff, I just want to add one thing. Because, but I think of one word this morning when I laid to bed about John. John is like a piece of candy for a kid. You can't ever get enough. And that's what I think about John. He's been my best male BFF. And I love him and will miss him.
Well, I'm Jeff Shoham. John Flanigan. I wrote these down because I don't know if I'm going to get through this. Always Johnny Boy to me. A better friend no one could ask for. We moved to Glastonbury 37 years ago to Grouse Hill Road, and the Flanagans were on Ash Swamp. John and I would notice each other's cars coming back and forth to work. I was at Alvin in Bloomfield. John was at Abacus, where it all began for John, his self-career, in Millbrook Commons. Once we met, the rest was history. Both young, ambitious businessmen who worked and played hard, we hit it off and became best of friends. From calling each other late at night to go out in the snowmobiles, which sometimes I had to ask Linda's permission. Dirt bikes, on the gas pipeline, of course, the race boats. The boats were the best. The times we had. In John's early days on his first boat, he called Irish Jack, named after his dad, who he was very proud of. And I think, Keith, you have that picture he framed. He wants you to hang that up. His navigation back then was pretty limited. Always being Mr. Confident, as we know John was. He was never wrong. John, how do we get to Newport? Easy, Jeff. At the end of the Connecticut River, take a left. There was a lot of adventures like that. I remember once going to Newport in my boat because I had a Loran, which I didn't know how to use quite well. It was in the fog, and all of a sudden Linda yelled, "Iceberg!" In New England. What it was that Rock Island, I don't know if you remember, Linda, as you approach Castle Hill coming into the harbor. Some of John-isms, I call it, that you might not know. John liked playing the accordion. We all thought he could. Doing splits on the dance floor when we were young. Yes, he did do splits. That ended after a while. John liked to take his afternoon naps. If he missed one at dinner, sometimes he'd fall asleep. John was not only a best friend to me, his loyalty and always being there no matter what made such an impact on my children's and Susan's life. Last time I saw John was when we left for Florida in October. We talked about a lot of things. John, your house in order, anything you want me to do? You can just imagine how tough that was. Last thing I said to John, and he did tell me he loved me when he was sick, and we did kiss each other a lot, which was not John. They said, don't you dare leave without saying goodbye to me. The Sunday that Ashley called, Susan and I were out for a ride in the boat, tooling along at 55-60, which John would have liked, and the starboard motor just failed. We're waiting there for sea tow, and all of a sudden I see John's number come up. And I said, John, you can't, and it was Ashley. Of course, we knew. All I want to say is, John, thanks for saying goodbye. I'll always remember our times together, and you'll always be with me forever. Thank you.
I usually write something really like special, and this time for some reason I just couldn't. I'm Kelly. I'm Ashley's best friend. So for 30 years. Hey, yo, Kel. That's what I would hear. Hey, yo, Kel. I'd come in, take my shoes off for Linda before I come into the house. And John would be sitting there, either at the breakfast nook or maybe even taking a nap in that little side room on Stanley Drive. Hey, yo, Kel. It was just the brightest greeting. And I know all of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, he just greeted people with such a life and light and smile. And I hate that I'm crying right now because I know he'd be like, come on, Kel, get it together, you know. So I have so many stories. He really was a second dad to me for 30 years. And the Flanagans, I mean, their life was different from my family's life. So when I was with the Flanagans, it was like I was in a movie sometimes. It was exciting and fast, and, you know, I never really knew if John was, you know, pulling the wool over my eyes or being serious. One time we were at a pretty fancy seafood restaurant in Newport, and I thought I might have been like 11 or 12. And I thought I was pretty fancy ordering scallops, like, ooh, scallops. And he looked at me and he said, Kel, you know what those are, right? And I was like, they're scallops. And he said, no. Those are whale testicles. Whale testicles. And I just looked at him like, and I honestly, to this day, like, anytime I eat a scallop, I think of John Flanagan. Because he's, you know, he's just a funny guy, and he probably thought, you know, oh, this is going to be a good one, I'm going to get Kel. There were other times when he wasn't so happy with me. He caught me making out with a boy on the beach in Jacksonville, which was really not a good place to be making out with anybody. Ash and I were in trouble that spring break, more so me, because I was older and I was supposed to be the good example for Ash. I drove in, he got a new BMW one year, and he said, Kel, let's go to Ashley's game in Philly. I said, all right, I don't even know why I was in Connecticut, but we drove down, and driving on Merritt Parkway, and John driving on Merritt Parkway should scare anyone to death, but for some reason I just sort of knew that I was safe, and he was testing it out, you know, getting through all the turns real fast and loving life, and again, fast. He drove to JMU, where I went to school, just 2 hours down the road from Ashley, to see her play. Torrential downpour, I'm talking like the most rain I've ever seen at any kind of game, and for some reason JMU had a policy of no umbrellas, but that didn't stop him. We stood in the stands, completely drenched from head to toe, watched the entire game, and that's who he was. I mean, he just, God, he loved his family, and he loved bringing other people into his family. And I had this on the back of my door growing up, you know, I could sign, hey Kel, hope to see you on the circuit, love Big John, you know, like, again, I was probably like 13, I didn't even know what that meant, but he was an awesome second dad, and, you know, I do have a recording of him singing, I can't help falling in love with you, the Elvis Presley song. I actually have it on cassette, and I'm going to cherish that. It was at a Christmas party at my parents' house, and he got up and he said, you could hear him saying to Ash, Ash, give me a beer, I need a beer. I don't know, give me a Miller Lite or something. I come from a union family, so the beer has to be union made, so that's why we didn't have Bud Light back there. So, but I know that each of you has a million stories about John, and I think it's great to share them, and I thank you for listening to my stories. I have many more, but I love you guys. You really are. It's a second family, and we're going to make his legacy live on forever, so I know he'll be happy about that. Thanks.
Well, my story's hopefully funny. It's the way I remember John. I've known John for 13 years. I was 13. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've known John since I was 13. And he used to come to pick Linda up for a date. And he'd walk up the back path to the house and walk in like he owned the joint. Never a knock, never a ring on the doorbell. And he'd walk in and hi Sal, hon, how you doing? Good, John. Linda's not ready, is she? Nah. And we'd go into the family room and we'd sit on the couch and watch TV. All of a sudden, he'd pick up a pillow, whack me, throw me to the floor, sit on my head, and pass gas. That's all I have to say. No one shared that
I'm Rich Fortunato. I'm an old friend of John's, and my claim to John's fame is that I own the boat Gone Bananas. You've probably seen a couple of pictures go by. Actually, it's right up here, isn't it? And John and I met in a car dealership, of all places. Both of us buying new cars. I was getting a truck to tow my race boat, and John was getting yet another big fun. I believe it was an Explorer. Great Explorer, right?
Yeah.
And Greg Smith, the salesman at the dealership, knew that I was racing boats, and I needed somebody reliable and helpful and so forth. And Greg introduced us, and we became fast friends. And John said, "Sure, I'll jump in." And I seem to remember Linda's reaction of, "What the hell are you thinking?" So we got together, and we went out and fooled around with the boat a little bit, and figured out that things were pretty good, and decided to race together. So we took my new dually that I picked up at the Ford dealership and towed our race boat down to Virginia Beach. And matter of fact, Linda, do you remember that ride?
I do. And that's the boat, right?
And that's the boat, Gone Bananas. So we went down there and we ran, and things went very well. We took a third place. And John seemed pretty good in the boat, and he was happy. Fast forward to our second race together, we go to Newburyport, Mass. And it was very, very rough water. 6 to 8 foot seas for anybody that has a boat, in a boat that does 75 miles an hour. Suffice it to say, it was a rough ride. So we idled out from the river and out into the ocean, and the race started, and we're running along, and maybe 30 seconds into the start, and I know there's a handful of guys, Steve's here, that's a racer. You can't imagine what you're in until you're actually out there, when there's 40 other vultures going the same way you are, trying to get to the same turn, all first. So I dropped the hammer and we're running, and John, as it says infamously on his sheet, looks at me and he goes, "You gotta be shitting me." I said, "Yeah, John, this is what it's all about." So we're running along, and the boat takes a turn to the side, and we're on the starboard side. We almost land the gunnel in the water. And he looks down and he says, "It's goddamn fish!" He sees fish out the window, or out the side of the boat, I'm sorry. So anyway, we make our laps, we're running through the race, and we're leading the entire time. So we get to the end of the race, and I yank the throttle back and slow down, and he starts screaming at me, "What the hell are you doing?" So, "John, it's over." "What do you mean it's over? The race is over. How do we do?" "Did you see anybody else with an F in front of us?" "No, we won." John was a happy guy. We idled the boat up to the turnboat, where you get your checkered flag, and brought him up there. And he went and he got the flag, and I could see how happy he was. I'd been fortunate to enjoy a victory prior to that, but with John it was really special. And then came the breaking of the rules. typically you would carry a cooler in the boat because you're dehydrated. You can't really drink in the rough water. You're out there for an hour. And I said, John, can you get me a Gatorade? Because we had a little cooler up in the front. Now, alcohol is banned from the boat. There was alcohol on our boat. I still to this day don't know how it got there, but I managed to enjoy a Bud Light with John on the way back in. And John and I got to race together. We won a world championship together. I'd never had the ability to do it on my own. The only way I could get it done was when John jumped in the boat. He had an incredible poise and composure and brought humor to everything. And I think everybody would probably share that sentiment. He just made us laugh, and the things he would say and do. And when we got to the World Championships, our primary rival was a boat from Japan. And John's dad, being a World War II fighter pilot, had some interesting take on other countries, which I really can't say anything much about right now, but suffice it to say, he had plenty of expletives of what we needed to do with these guys. And for 2 races straight, when we won the World Championship, he was looking over his shoulder and screaming at me, lean on it, lean on it, lean on it. And we did. And we got to celebrate that beer one more time as we won the World Championship. I was lucky to race with him for 2 years and have him in my life. John introduced me to some other wonderful friends, one in particular, Russ Rushan, who unfortunately passed about 2 years ago. And now they're together, and I guarantee you they're laughing. So anyway, guys, I hope you all raise your glass for John again to his World Championship. It was 25 years ago, 2 weeks ago, that we won.
Hello, I'm RJ Asterica. I'm Noni's son, John's uncle, John's nephew. For those who know my family, know my dad and I couldn't be probably any more opposite than Uncle John. He had big fun, motorcycles, quads, boats, and we had a Honda Accord and a moped. You know how to fix stuff, we don't know how to fix anything. That being said, being total opposites, he still loved us. One of the special things over the past years my parents have done with Linda and John is go to Florida for a few months in the winter, and I know they've always cherished that, each and every one of them. But yeah, I just wanted to share memories, you know, a couple days on the Connecticut River on power play, Uncle John being frustrated, trying to pull me on the kneeboard, unsuccessfully dragging me across the water. Keep your arms straight, Arch! I'm still convinced that boat was not suitable for kneeboarding. Pull your arms out of your socket. Well, we're all going to miss him. We love him, and I just wanted to share those. So thank you very much.
If there's anyone else, come up, but if not, my Uncle Raymond is going to close this out. So, okay. Oh, there's a couple more.
I really didn't prepare anything, but I'm Karen, better known as Binky, the eldest of the 6. And I have to say, unlike Noni, I was a better role model. I did not buy any beer. And I tried to set an example and study hard, which none of my brothers did, I don't think. But John was very, very special brother, caring uncle. And I have 2 incidents to cite. Our son, Mark, and his brother both went to a small liberal arts college in Colorado Springs, Colorado College. And when Mark graduated, it was a recessionary time and he did not have a job for months on end. And John called and said, Bink, I'm really concerned about Mark. I want him to come work for me, and I want him to live with us. And that's what he did. And Mark today is the VP of Marketing of a craft brewery in San Diego, and Brother John takes all the credit. And he said, I taught him everything he knows about marketing. But he is eternally grateful to them for doing that. And years after that, well, in fact, maybe 15 years ago, we moved to Paris, and it was all wonderful, a fabulous life, living the dream. And when the 3 years were up, my husband was forced to retire. It was out of the blue. We were really fine. But John heard about it, and he immediately said, Bink, do you need any money? Just tell me how much, and I write the check. He cared about family. And of course, we will miss him too. Thank you.
I'm Larry Flanigan, one of John's new friends, actually. And I think this is such a... Yeah, sorry. I think this is such a tribute when I look out and look at all these old friends of John. I walked in the room and I said, my God, I don't know very many people. But what a tribute to John. I met John first at a Halloween party when he came as Father John.
You can pick this up.
Okay. When he came, Linda, do you remember that? What did you come as? Something. But literally, he came as a priest, Father John. And that was the first time I met him. And I was so impressed. I mean, we talked and started to get acquainted. But I really didn't know John too well until I came down. I had a quadruple heart bypass. And the recovery was really very slow for me. And John would just drive by the house and stop and knock on the door unannounced. And he'd come in and just chat for a half an hour, and then off he would go to lunch with one of you old pals and so forth. And he just kept doing it, and I felt I developed a very, very close friendship with John. And when he became ill, I was so lucky to be there for him. And I talked to him every other day, and he is a guy with the biggest heart that you'd ever know. And I love him, and I know he's going to just have a wonderful time where he is now. Thank you all.
How you doing? I'm Steve Thiel. I am also one of John's boat racing partners after he raced with Rich. And I have two funny John stories out of that, many possible ones. But John and I were racing, and we were at they'd have racer parties, before the race. And we had a few beers, and we were in this old style hotel where they had a balcony, and John had a few pops in him, and he decides to jump on my back as I'm walking. So we're like wrestling in the hallway. So I jumped backwards, and I knocked him through a door of a hotel, and we go flying, land on the floor, and there's a couple in there with their kids watching TV. So we got up and we ran out of there, and I don't think I've ever laughed so hard in my entire life. I think I laughed for about a half an hour straight. So in the national championship, we were running first. We're going for the national championship. We got pinched between two big, like 40 skaters. The boats go like 150, ours went about 110. And I think John got a little nervous on that one. I think that got him nervous. So after that race, he decided that he was going to put his son in, Michael. So Michael and I raced the following year. So the first race of the season, we're at Lake Winnipesaukee, and we're racing the gangster that Keith was talking about. And we're both going around the turn side by side. Boat was running great, and the guy pushes us out into the spectator fleet. So we have to come off plane, right? So we're both in the spectator fleet, and then we come off plane. We get back on the race course,
and then we go on to win the race. We destroyed it, right? And he was pissed. He was so pissed, he filed a protest. He said we were in the spectator fleet, so it was going to cost us a penalty. So they wound up getting first, and we got second. So there was some animosity there. So we go up for our second place prize, Michael and I, and the whole place is just cheering for us because they knew we really won. And this really pissed him off. So he starts getting in the face of our mechanic, and he's like, this big New York tough guy. And he's chest bumping him, pushing him, and threatening our mechanic. So all of a sudden Keith shows up, right? So Keith shows up, and he goes, I'm going to tear those gold chains off your guinea neck and throw them down your throat.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we hear Ashley in the background, kick his ass, Keith, kick his ass. And the Linda's going, Keith, don't you touch him. So then afterwards what happened is John decided he was going to place a bet with this guy. He bet him $5,000 that we're going to beat him in the next race in Chicago. This is Michael and I. And I'm like, all right, good, you got this? You're going to cover this, John? He goes, no, I'm not going there. He says, you guys got it, right? So he gets us into this bet, and he takes off on the whole thing. So, but I'm like, thanks a lot, buddy. But John was an awesome guy. Many great memories. Flanigan family, you guys are awesome. Let's have a toast.
Yeah.
Cheers. Cheers to John.
Yes, also
My name is Flipper, and I'm like Michael Flanigan's my favorite mother-in-law. And make no mistake, death indeed is our enemy. And I'm sad that we have to be here, but I'm so glad that I was able to get to know a little bit more about John's life. John walked into our life, and we're very, very grateful. We've been able to meet the whole family. We've been able to meet friends. We've been able to hear expressions of something so precious that John made such an impression on each of your lives. A very, very wise man once said that death, the day of death, is better than the day of life. And the day that we're born, we're like a clean slate. We haven't made an impression. We haven't set any standards. We haven't made friends. But truly, the day of John's death here, with the expressions that you have, has shown that John really made a life for himself. He made a reputation that's strong, and it's one that we could all learn from. When I first met John, I was a little standoffish because I thought he was gruff, and I thought, oh, I don't know. And it wasn't long after that my husband was able to have John give him a kiss on the cheek. And I knew from then on that we were solid with the Flanigan plan, and that John indeed had turned out to be a very good friend of ours. So thank you for inviting us here this day, and thank you all for your expressions and reminding us that the day will come when we're hoping that people will be as kind and loving as you've been for John today.
I had all kinds of things written down, but after hearing so many of the things I'd written, previously stated by many people, I would just like to say that I think it's a miracle that John ever made it to 67 years old. And that I know that I am personally responsible for saving John's life twice. And I'm sure there's many of you out here that could probably boast at least twice, maybe 3 or 4 times that you saved John's life. But first happened with us. I think we were living in Peekskill, New York, and we were probably 4 or 5 years old. John was less than a year older than I am. Irish twins, 50 weeks apart. And I was playing on the side of the house, minding my own business, and all of a sudden I heard some screaming, and I looked up, and John was hanging out of our bedroom window by his fingertips, screaming, "Help! Help!" And I'm like, I don't think I could catch this guy. So I called my mother and my sister, I think were weeding the garden. They ran up there, they pulled John in. My mother was hysterical. She said, "John, what happened?" And he said, the wind blew me out. That was the first time, you know. John and I, in that house in Peekskill, was a 3-bedroom house. 3 girls, 3 boys, and my folks downstairs. So the girls slept in one room, we slept in the other. Joe had a bed, and John and I had the same bed for the first 10 years of our life. It's amazing I continue to talk to him. He was a bedwetter. I hope he figured that out before he met Linda. But anyway, you know, we had our share of ups and downs, and you know, I think we got boxing gloves when we were a little kid, just one pair. He took the right hand, I got the left. My jab was not so good, so he clocked me with the right. And I was known as the crybaby, you know, between Joe and John. It was not easy. It's lucky I survived. But finally, you know, John only was about 5'8", and finally around 9th and 10th grade, I grew about 6 or 8 inches, and I was getting near 6 feet tall and 135 pounds. And John was 5'8", and started to get a little jelly belly. He probably started drinking beer. And of all the things, this is the second time I saved his life. On a Sunday night, watching TV, I'm watching Ed Sullivan. And John is upstairs in my parents' room studying at my parents' desk. Now that's unbelievable in itself. So when Ed Sullivan was done, he wanted to watch Bonanza, and he came down to watch Bonanza. And I decided I'm going to go up and study. That's 2 miracles in one day, the 2 of us studying. So I go up and I'm studying at my mother's desk, and John's watching Bonanza. So when Bonanza was over, John comes upstairs, and he says, "Hey, Raymond, you're studying at my desk." I said, "No, man, you were watching TV. I'm here now." And John says, "Get the heck out of here, I'm telling you." I said, "John, I'm studying here now." So he walked out of the room, and I thought he was done with, but I suspected he had something in mind. And I sat there at the desk, and I looked in the window, the bedroom window in front of me, and I saw him sneaking up behind me. And he came up, and he was trying to yank me off the desk and grab my shoulders and pull me off the desk. And I got up, and I came up with an elbow, and I caught him right in the chin. And I jumped on him, and I had him in a chokehold. And I had him, I'm telling you, I had him. And he said, let go of me. He says, "You're going to kill me." And I said, "That's what I'm trying to do." And I'm holding and holding. And my mother came up, and she's kicking me. She says, "Raymond, let go of him. You're going to kill him." I said, "I know." Finally, she kicked me one more time, and I let go of him. That's not the end of the story. So my mother went back downstairs, and John looked me in the eye from about 3 inches away. He says, "You want to finish this in the basement?" I've been through 16 years of getting the dickens, you know, knocked out of me. And now I'm 6 feet tall and 135 pounds. And adrenaline is a really weird thing. And I looked at him and I said, "Yeah." We went downstairs in the basement, an unfinished basement at the time, and we stood arms distance between us, and we started punching him. This was my first fist fight. John was about 30-0 in amateur bouts. And he started punching. Every once in a while I tried to touch his chin or something, but my head was throbbing and my lip was visible and I could see my eyebrow. And John said, "You had enough?" I I said, no, you had enough, your hands hurt? Boom! He hit me a 3 or 4 more. And you had enough now? I said, no freaking way, you had enough matter, you know. And finally he said, heck with you. And he walked out of there. So, that's when he probably saved my life. Anyway, I'm going to get back to, John also had a thing about money, you know. As young kids, he understood the value of the dollar. We used to go to my grandparents' house in Stuyvesant town, and my grandmother would cook, and afterwards my grandfather would walk us down to get us in the station wagon and go back to Peekskill. And my grandfather used to fold a dollar bill up in his hand, and he always slide the boys $1. I don't know that he ever gave money to the girls, but he always gave John and Joe and I $1. And we would slide it into our pocket real cool. And one time we did this, and we came back to Peekskill, and we went up to our room, and right by our bed, our bureau, and John reached in his pocket, and he unfolded his dollar bill. And I reached into mine, and I unfolded it. I said, oh my God. I said, John, Grandpa gave me a $20 bill. This is like 1956. 20 bucks was a lot of money. My grandfather probably made 40 or 60 bucks in a week at the time. So I said, oh my God. John says, shut up. Don't say anything. I said, John, I can't keep this. He says, shut up. I'm telling you, they're going to take it from you. I said, John, I can't keep this. He says, I'll split it with you. So I couldn't sleep all night. In the morning, I went down and saw my dad. And I said, Dad, I think Grandpa made a mistake last night. I told him what he used to do, fold the $1 up. And I told him that he gave me a 20. And my father said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I think maybe we should call him up. And my father got my grandfather on the phone, and he said, hi, Raymond. I said, Grandpa, I said, I think you made a mistake last night. I think you accidentally gave me a $20 bill. And my grandfather said, you know, Raymond, he says, you're an honest boy. You keep that money. And I looked at John. You got no chance of splitting this with me. I think when, you know, a lot of people, I think the impression, if they didn't know John well, they thought that he never worked. You know, he was always playing and watching the kids' sports games. But he had a knack for working hard. So he took his business from he and Eddie and a serviceman and a 3-man little crew in Bloomfield selling typewriters and copiers to a company of over 100 employees. And then, when Danka came along, he sold that business. And he watched as Danka drove his pride and joy into the ground. And they eventually left the state and went south. And John had already started something new up in DocuSource. I think his name was John Murphy. He was on the board. And he had an assumed name, but it was still fairly Irish. Anyway, he had already, you know, courted his old customers back. He got those all back. And he built DocuSource and then sold it again. Well, I don't know that I'd give $2 for a company that sells copiers and faxes today, because you don't really use them. You can do most of it with your iPhone. And John probably, what he'll be remembered the most for, is he changed the world. Well, maybe not just John, but John had the first cell phone. And that thing was like huge. It was in a box. And the only guys that had them were drug dealers and CEOs of major corporations at the time. But John had to have one. He put it in his car. The thing was humongous. So all this cell phone thing you see out there today, that started with my brother. About 6 years ago, John, I guess it was my 60th, he says to me, hey Raymond, could you do me a favor? And I said, yeah, sure, what is it? He says, someday, you know, if I pass away before you, he says, I'd like you to sing at my funeral. I said, oh, really? And he says, yeah. I said, you want me to sing my signature tune, put another log on the fire? That, you know, I've been all this thing. He says, no. He says, I want you to sing He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother. And I said, really? I said, John, do you have any idea how hard that song is and how difficult it would be? And he said, you know, you could do it. And I see his friends and grandkids. He did help you believe that you could do it. You know, whether it was scoring a touchdown or scoring a goal, I think to have John say, you know, Ashley, you could do it. Keith, you could do it. Michael, you could do it. So we printed out, there's a box, and we're going to send these around. So it'll take us a minute to get set up. We're going to put karaoke words on the screen. And John was known for several songs. If you could all help distribute those who'd ever like to sing. You don't have to have a good voice, because we all know John's was nothing really. And of course, you guys all contributed by encouraging him to sing. So his songs, we're going to start with He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother. And then we're going to go to his Elvis one, which was Can't Help Falling in Love with You, and we'll finish with My Way. It'll take a minute or two for us to get it set up on the big screen, the words, and we'll play some music for you. And hopefully you can help me out on my first one, and then we'll sing the other one. With the many winding road that leads us to who knows where, but I'm strong enough to carry on. He ain't heavy, he's my brother. So on we go. It's a welfare is my concern. No burden is he to bear. We'll get there. For I know he would not encumber me. He ain't heavy, he's my brother. If I'm a lady at all, I'm a lady with sadness that everyone's heart isn't filled with gladness of a love for one another. It's a long, long road from which there is no return. But we're on the way to there. Why not share? And your love doesn't weigh me down at all. He ain't heavy, he's my brother. God bless you, John. He ain't heavy, God bless you, John. Only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you. Would it be a sin if I can't help falling in love with you? Like a river flows surely to the sea, darling, so it goes. Some things are meant to be. Take my hand, take my whole life too. Oh, I can't help falling in love with you. The river flows surely to the sea, darling, so it goes. Some things are meant to be. Take my hand, take my whole life too. Oh, I can't help falling in love with you. Oh, falling in love with you. Now the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full. I've traveled each every highway. I did it my way. Yes, I do. I get in here. But then again, too few to mention. What I had to do. Saw it through. Without exception, I planned each charted course, each careful step along the highway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Yes, there were times I'm sure you knew
I've had my fill, my share of blues. To subside, I'm so amusing to me. I get up and then I say, not in a shy way. Oh no, no, not me. I did it my way. What has he done? Here's your fifth. For he has failed, and he has not to say the things it's going to feel, and not the words what you give. At the shows I felt the blues, and didn't friends and all his relatives. So overwhelming to see you all. God bless all of you. John loved you all.